Hi everybody, today I'm going to talk to you about reptilians, but if I'm looking a bit frazzled, it's because we just got back from Spain about half an hour ago and I'm still a bit, Anyway, we're back in this studio again today, and I was asked for newcomers if I would point out that the reason that we've got all this stuff going around is because we want you to be able to get access to our site quite easily, which is called www.thestairwaytofreedom, all one word, .org. And you can see, and amongst other things, there's a book that you can see advertised on the screens at the back, and you can see the site going round on the whirligig up the top. Okay, but we're going to talk about reptilians. And this information was given to me by the Great White Brotherhood, as usual. Now, reptilians, when described, what I'm going to do is read most of it, and then where I think maybe it needs a bit of explanation, I will, but it's fairly self-explanatory, so don't worry. Okay, when describing the so-called reptilians, we need to distinguish fact from fiction. There has been much fake information perpetrated concerning them, which has infiltrated the collective wisdom and is accepted as fact when it is not so. Let us first say that there has been throughout the long history of man a number of different races, some of which survived and some of which have died out. Equally, there has been a number of mythical beings resembling humans somewhat that were never real, but that people consider used to live, such as centaurs and minotaurs and so on. Lastly, there are various creatures that live in the etheric and astral realms that people have seen from time to time and have become legend over the years. So it is important to try to discern fact from fiction. Okay, now, with regard to reptilians, we wish to say that such a race does exist, but they do not necessarily have the powers that are sometimes attributed to them. The so-called reptilians are an ancient race that chose, like some other races, to live apart from us humans, and so most of them live in underground caverns, of which there are many not far under the surface of the earth. I'm going to break off here and say this idea of hollow earth is actually not true. But I looked it up. The earth radius, which means from the center of the earth to the crust, to the outside, is 4,000 miles. That's a long way. And inside the earth, there's supposed to be all this molten core and stuff. I don't know. I've never been down there. Don't suppose you have. But just under the surface, there are vast caverns that possibly have been cut out by water over the millions of years that Earth has existed. And there are a number of races that actually live down there that we know very little about. Okay? Now, I'll go on. However, just like us humans, there are a number of different types, some of reptilians, some friendly to us and some hostile, just as we find with humanity. We could say that they, the reptilians, started out vaguely human, but that would not be exactly true. Many years ago, the directors of life, when they were experimenting with different life forms to inhabit the earth, discovered that the basic human shape gave the greatest possibility for successful living on the face of the earth. So we have a variety of life forms with a head, a body, 2 forearms and 2 legs. Not only humans have this shape, but most mammals also follow this pattern, even though most animals found it easier to walk on all 4s. So to return to the reptilians, they are one of the human-like life forms that were placed on Earth long years ago and have survived living apart from other human life forms, us, for instance, thus avoiding any conflict with us, which could have resulted in their extinction, as was the case of the giants and virtually all the other human-like life forms, the skeletal remains of which are discovered from time to time, like the Neanderthals, for instance. And I'll just break off once again and say that giants did live a long time ago. Some were indeed enormous, 30 or 40 feet tall, and they've gradually been wiped out by us over the years. But here and there throughout isolated regions, there are still some so-called giants that live, although apparently their height is not much more than a tall human nowadays. Okay? Where are we? Thus, they tend to live underground and have avoided the extinction level events that have rocked the planet Earth a number of times. We're talking about the things that we call the flood in the Bible and so on. There's been a number of these events over long periods of time. And the fact that they survived without being wiped out from time to time has given them the ability to develop the so-called gifts of the Spirit that we all have quiescent in us, but they've had the opportunity to develop. So they are attributed with having almost miraculous powers: telekinesis, teleportation, clairvoyance, and so on. Thus, if seen by us humans, they can seem to disappear at will, jump huge distances, and control the minds and bodies of humans. And there's a note here, which I've already mentioned. We've got these powers, but we don't really, we've never developed how to use them. Okay. Now, we draw a distinction between humans and reptilians, excuse me, to make an explanation easy, but we wish to stress that reptilians are a close cousin of us humans and could, if they chose, interbreed with humans. Okay? However, they are a proud and arrogant race of beings. Can I have a swift drink of water? Excuse me. Thank you. They are a proud and arrogant race of beings that regard us as primitive and tend to stay away from us. There are some of the more friendly ones that study us rather as we study animals. At the other extreme, there are some who enslave some humans rather as white people tended to enslave black people years ago. Lastly, it must be said that there are a psychopathic few who overshadow wealthy and influential individuals for exactly the same reason that those humans, being psychopathic, control the masses. Now, perhaps, if you don't mind, you may have heard of people who change their face shapes and become reptilian looking for a bit. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story. Many, many years ago, I was sitting meditating one evening. My family and my wife and kids were in a living room, and I was in another room just adjacent, and I was talking to a guide, and we got really close and we were having a deep conversation, and without me knowing it, he really overshadowed me, not in an evil way like reptilians do, but in a positive way, but to make the communication as clear as possible. And I went into the living room after I said goodbye to this guide, and my family looked at me in horror. They said, "That's not you. You've got a different face." And what it was this guide had overshadowed me and impressed on me his face, his personality, what he looked like. So I think that's what happens when reptilians overshadow a human, and the human takes on that reptilian face. They're being overshadowed and being impressed so much with a reptilian personality that they assume that reptilian look. That's all I can imagine would happen. Anyway, we're almost through. So, to recapitulate, there is this old race of beings, please excuse me, that are basically human, that were created long ago, that live apart from us and are much more advanced than us. They have exactly the same personalities as us, both good and bad. They do not look like us, but we could say the same about an Australian Aboriginal compared to a European person. They have this vague reptilian look, some more than others, the result of eons of interbreeding and also of living underground, but they are an offshoot of the human race in many ways. Okay, now that's what I was given. So I'm going to stop there. As usual, any questions, please ask, and I'll be happy to answer if I can. Now, just before I go, I've been given a number of downloads. I've written down seven of the more interesting ones here. I'm going to read them out to you, and if you're interested, tell me what you'd like me to talk about, and I will. Now, the first one, excuse me, the first one is the crucifixion story of Jesus and the two thieves and all that, what that actually means. The second one is black-eyed children. The third one was about karma. The fourth one was what's actually happening about Atlantis, the true story of Atlantis. The fifth one is Hat Man, Shadow Man and the Hag, what that's all about. The sixth one is the story of Adam and Eve. And the seventh one is what all the pyramids all around the world mean, what they're there for, okay? Now, I've got the lowdown from the Great White Brotherhood about all those subjects and more, and I'll gladly discuss them with you, but please tell me what you think is most interesting to you, and I'll try and make a video about that next time, okay? So thank you very much for listening to me. I'm sorry it was all a bit garbled, but as I said, I just got back from Spain and I'm a little bit in a flurry, but I wanted to get this video out to you, and so I thank you very much for listening. Okay, bye.